A very good afternoon and a good morning or good evening to our guests, all our viewers and listeners. I, on behalf of NIIC, welcome you all for our webinar on the topic China-Europe relations. As we know, China's diplomatic and economic outreach across the continent has left many of us with ideas, questions, and visions. To speak on this topic and discuss more, we have our distinguished speaker today, Professor Wang Yiwei. On that note, let me invite our research director, Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, to give the welcome address and introduce our guest for the hour. Dr. Jaiswal.
Thank you, Sarabna. Professor Dr. Wang Yiwei and dear participants, first of all, let me welcome you all to NICE webinar. We are really honored to have Professor Wang Yiwei with us today. Professor Wang, please allow us to introduce our institute briefly. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is an independent, apolitical, and non-partisan think tank based in Kathmandu, which believes in freedom, democracy, and world free from conflict. We envision a world where sources of insecurity are identified and understood, conflicts are prevented or resolved, and peace is respected. Keeping in mind the theme of today's webinar, I would like to state that we also have our China Studies Center that examines China's international strategic thinking and conduct, foreign and security policy, and the impact of domestic politics and economy on China's foreign relations. For more details, you can also visit our website, which is mentioned on the screen. As Sarabna has mentioned, Professor Wang would be talking on China-Europe relation. Let me briefly introduce Professor Wang to our audience. Professor Wang Yiwei is a Jean Monnet Chair Professor, Director of Institute of International Affairs, Director of Center for European Studies at Renmin University of China. He is expert advisor of CCPIT Advisory Committee and Turkish TRT World Forum. The Council member of China Center for International Economic Exchange and Chinese Institute for Foreign Affairs. He was formerly the diplomat at Chinese mission to the European Union from 2008 to 2011 and distinguished professor at Tongji University from 2011 to 2013. Professor of Center for American Studies at Fudan University from 2001 to 2008, visiting professor of Yonsei University in 2005, and Fox Fellow of Yale University from 2000 to 2001. His main research includes Belt and Road Studies, European integration, public diplomacy, Chinese foreign policy, and EU-China relations. His recent books include The Decline of Modern Civilization and The Dawn of Community for Shared Future for Mankind, and Interconnected World, China and the Belt and Road Initiative, China Connects the World, What Behind the Belt and Road Initiative, translated into 15 versions, New World Press in April 2017. The Belt and Road Initiative, What China Will Offer the World in Its Rise, translated into 20 versions, both book of the year of 2015-2016, Haishang, Revelations of European Civilization, both in Chinese and English, and China NATO Studies Series. He was invited to give keynote address at BRI at UNESCO and side event of UN General Assembly. He attended over 1,000 forums and conferences such as Belt and Road Initiative International Cooperation Forum, Munich Security Conference, Shangri-La Dialogue, Valdai Club Forum, Boao Asia Forum, Wilton Park Conference, Stockholm China Forum, Berlin Diplomatic Forum, and World Government Summit. He is a frequent guest interviewed by South China Morning Post, Russia Today, CCTV, CGTN, BBC, New York Times, and other media. Professor Dr. Wang, once again, thank you. Welcome to our program.
Thank you, Dr. Jaiswal. I think we are already running out of some time, so let us dive straight into the program. Welcome, Professor Yiwei. You would have about 30 to 35 minutes to make your remarks and interventions and presentation. This will be followed by a Q&A. I will request our audience to type in their questions, if any, in the chat box on Zoom or on our Facebook page where we are streaming live. You may also share the event on various social media platforms and on Twitter, where you can also leave a question for our speaker. With this, let me pass on the floor to you, Professor Wang Yiwei.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, and my pleasure to share my views on the China-European relations. When the Chinese talk about Europe, there are three different concepts. Europe as a geography meaning. That's clear. I think it's similar with Nepal and other countries' understanding. Political meaning, European Union, and culturally meaning, maybe include Russia. So it's a different Europe. But when we talk about China-European relations, now it's more identify the China-EU relations. After Brexit, the UK is not part of China-Europe relation anymore. So Europeans, in the eyes of Chinese, it means it's a Western civilization, a Roman Empire, and even Christianity, all this through the Asian Silk Road, Eurasia continent. Now we are behind mutual connectivity. And the second, as an industrial civilization, China joined the globalization, benefit a lot, industrialized. Half of the Chinese technology transferred from abroad, transferred from the European Union countries. So China, in this regard, very appreciative of the cooperation with Europe. And thirdly, European Union is also a pioneer in the innovation of human civilization, like European Union first put forward so carbon neutrality by 2050, and China followed, also put forward by 2060 to reach the neutrality emission goal by 2030 emission climax. So sustainable development, inclusive development, all this I think is a new kind of civilization. It's my Jean Monnet project titled European Union as a modern civilization. And traditional globalization, the US as an innovation power, China as a marketization power, the so-called word factory, EU as a normative power. So the trilateral work together to run the economic globalization quite well. However, when Trump took power as American president, the so-called decouple and of the trade war and the new Cold War even. So the relations of China and the US are more and more in trouble. Even Biden took power, cannot change that kind of scenario so much. So China pay more attention to the relations with Europe. For that's the reason we signed, not signed, but reached the deal, the bilateral investment treaty. In the European concept, it's a CAI, Comprehensive Investment Treaty, the end of last year. So that means Europe, in the eyes of China, more and more important. So there are three major driving forces of the industrialization and also regionalization. Europe, European Union, which Germany as a leading power in the manufacturing power. United States is NAFTA now 2.0, and now China. Originally it's Japan in the Eastern Asia. So now we reach the RCEP. So these are three major integration and also manufacturing powers running the globalization. Now the US is more suspicious about China, even put China as a rivalry. So that reason I said China and EU relations is more important for both sides to hedging the US hegemony, particularly US dollar hegemony. And US use the long arm justification in the Iranian nuclear issues and the sanctions to Chinese and European companies, which enforce China and Europe to develop their own financial tools. Like in China, the chips. Europe, they are so-called NERGs. So the China-Europe Rail Express also help a lot to boom the logistic, to support the equipments and the materials to help the anti-pandemic. So we identify China-Europe relations as the four scenarios. First is China and Europe is a major market. European Union is a single market. China is a big market, not a traditional made in China, but also servers and consumer. Now, when China has now 400 million middle class, by 2035, China will double the middle class to 800 million, which consume a lot of the luxury products from Europe. Second is two major forces in multilateral globalization. China global governance, like climate change. And thirdly, China and Europe are two major civilizations. Now we reach the idea of the two more partners. One is a digital partner, green partner. As I said, climate change, the neutrality emission, and the digitalization. Europe needs China because they don't have their own search engine. China will have Baidu, Tencent, Huawei. Besides, US is China and the top 10 ICT companies. So now Europe need with Huawei to have their own Europeans, Google. So that's the digital partnership. And the green, as I said, China is more cut the CO2 emission from the manufacturing way. Europe is more from the transportation and the housing, so which is very complementary. So that's the given more diverse new driving forces for China-EU comprehensive strategic partnership. In the eyes of China, Europe is different with United States, particularly for the European Union. Firstly, United States is a very religious country, so-called city upon the hill. Like President Obama, the biography, the name is a promised land, chosen people. So Europe is more circular, like China. Second, US is they have the hegemonic system, political alliance system. They have hub-and-spoken system in Asia, China, US, Japan alliance, US, Korea, US, Philippines, US, even Thailand, Australia, New Zealand. Now they put the so-called Quad with India, Australia, Japan, exclusive to China. So that's the US, always exclusive. US dominant when they cannot dominate the American first. Now Biden come back, but Biden's multilateralism is American leadership under Americans' leadership. So President Xi just spoke in the Davos, said this is a pseudo multilateralism. It's in the name of the multilateralism, actually it serves the US unilateralism. So this is the alliance system, different with Europe. Of course, 22 European Union members, they're also NATO members. Strategically, security depends on the US. Thirdly, the US is anti-communism because of the religion, meaning Communist Party said we don't believe any God. Secular civilization. Second, it's a public property. US is more focused on protect the private property rights. And also, the many Americans consider China as a Soviet Union, a Communist Party, the anti-communist party mindset. However, in Europe, there's not so many religion thinking. It's not hegemonic power. Socialism, communism is born in Europe, so it's not so much against particularly like the Pompeo. They want divided Chinese people with the Communist Party of China. So that makes the Chinese more trust Europe, not trust the United States. Particularly for the China, US is a hegemonic power, cannot accept the rights of China. But Europe can accept only if China more respect the rules of Europe, like human rights, democracy, or good governance, all this. So that's the even Europe also interfere domestic affairs of China, like in Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and but US is more security, military ideology conceived, and more vital, like do harm to China national security, state security. But Europe is more ideology, even the ideology thinking, but not so many national security geography consideration. Even they have the name, but of course they have similar understanding of China. Both US and Europe think about China as a systematic rival. Chinese political system say honor and practice industrial policy strategy, which will cost the challenges and threat to the US and Europe. and also consider about China model ideology, the challenges so-called universal values. They also highlights the so-called reciprocity, not the views of China as a developing country anymore, the views of China as a superpower. And also interfere domestic affairs of China. So that's many some similarities or common grounds on China. So, however, Chinese views of Europe and the US quite different, as I mentioned. So we need now presidency put forward the committee of common destiny or shared future, which also echoed by like Chancellor Merkel. She also said that the Europeans' destiny should be on the Europeans' hand, not too much rely on somebody, external force like the United States. So strategic autonomy, European Union, Soviet Union, sovereignty, digital sovereignty will be highlighted in Germany and in France, in the European countries. So China definitely also support. So that reason we reached the comprehensive investment treaty deal with the European Union because help each other to have more strategic autonomy. That's and also help Euro-Asia mutually connectivity. So Central European countries, Central Asian countries benefit from the mutual connectivity Euro-Asia. And also European and Americans worry about China's challenging from quantity to quality, high technology innovation. However, many European countries, they have signed a deal with China to jointly build the BRI, including 17 Central and Eastern European countries, and also Italy as a first G7 country signed the deal, Portugal, and Luxembourg, Switzerland, even not a European Union member. And France also signed the third-party market cooperation deal with Chinese government. Germany, the Siemens, we signed the deal with Chinese company. Even UK, also Minister of Finance, also cooperate to set the rules of the financial principles in the BRI. So all this makes China and Europe cooperations traditionally also in the BRI projects be more highlight. And now that many of the European countries, including UK, Germany, France, now the European Union as well, put their Indo-Pacific strategy follow the US, but they're different meaning. The US is more military security consideration. Europeans are more from the mutual connectivity, big data, market, logistics support, because the Indian Ocean is a connect Pacific and Atlantic. It's about more than 2 billion new labels or consumers join the globalization. They're also concerned about India as a emerging market. So all these differences between European Union and the United States, which can have different cooperation opportunities and results with China. We will have the 17+1 summit very soon. The 17 Central and Eastern European countries, they cooperate with China on mutual connectivity, infrastructure building, energy, even finance and people-to-people connections. And China also support those countries to build more mutually connectivity platforms. For instance, Greece, the Belarus port, Chinese COSCO invest, help them logistic, not just rely on the Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Hamburg from the west to the east, but also from the south to extend to the north, from the Mediterranean Sea to the Baltic Sea as well. Of course, China-European relations have many challenges, including human rights, systematic rival, so-called IPR. However, we reached the investment treaty include the labor rights, sustainable development, market access, fair competition, ICT market open, and also financial and education market open to the European Union. And as well, European Union is also open the market to China. So we definitely will help the very high level, high standard of the investment treaty, which we are asking maybe in the future of the FTA with Europe. It's very important to run the globalization from Euro-Asia continent and maritime as well. So that's basically the major ideas, but I can show you some 2 PPTs more in details about what I'm talking. Okay, we'll talk about China-EU relations. You know, for a long time, we think about the EU as a single market. So it's a more economic cooperation. For a long time, it's it's a premier level cooperation, particularly in the Jiang Zemin, Hu Jintao period, premier of China, and more in charge of economic cooperation. So China-EU summit is not a real summit, it's a premier level, including 17+1. But now, it's because the Chinese domestic, not just political system, but it's more focused on the President Xi's leadership and the Communist Party's leadership. So we increased the level to presidential cooperation, even though European Union is not a single state. They don't have the head of state, the European Commission President, European Council President. However, it's more focused on economic cooperation. When China joined the WTO, so what kind of trade with the EU? So this is data to show you about the top 10 products EU export to China or China export to the European Union market. So we import more products from European Union, more telecommunication equipment, machinery, industries, aircraft, like you know, the Airbus, textile, leather, electronic circuits, heating, cooling system, other, and so this is more, not in details. But China import from China is toys that every country like now it's data producing machines. You see, so the structure of the trade. So it makes China is more import, not just high products, high technology products from Europe, luxury products, but now it's more and more from agricultural products as well, like a Euro-Asia trend, more import from like the wine, the oil, the olive oil from Europe, because we have the import export in Shanghai. So that's different with previous time. So that's the current structure to show you. European Union for a long time is the #1 trade partner in the past 16 years. Only last year replaced by ASEAN, because maybe it's a Brexit. Also, ASEAN countries control the pandemic much better than Europe. And also because of the pandemic, after pandemic, globalization, global regionalization is more popular for geography and with the global value chain and the supply chain readjustment. So now Europe is a second trade partner for China, but China replaced the US as a #1 trade partner for Europe, for European Union. Even investment now is a huge potential, because trade volumes one day is more than 1 billion euros. However, the investment is just now it's a 5% or even less than 10% of all the European Union attract. So it's a huge potential. Now, the strengthened export capacity in the high technology fields. That's the more focused on the new carbon, low carbon technology, new energy investment, automobile, electronic automobiles, chemical products, and also medical like equipment, medical equipments, and so that's China-EU relations is more balanced towards that direction. Firstly, trade as for a long time the top cooperation area to more investment. Second, from the loss of goods trade, now it's more servers, IPR. And then from trade to investment, so it's more balanced. And though narrowed in the Western Europeans, but now it's more and more whole Europe, including Central and Eastern European countries. So that's the China-EU cooperation in the trade and investment. The deficit for a long time, because made in China, China about the water factory. So Europeans complain about the deficit from China. Every country actually also complain, including India, US. But now we will buy more, as I said, to reach to keep this more balanced. So that's the trade deficit. When China more focused on the high value intensive products import from Europe, we can reduce this, but still takes time. Again, the value added, Europe is still leading. China's catching up way quickly, and so European Union so help China a lot to catch up in the global value chains. It's more the US, Japan, and other Western countries combined together. So that's the concept of China industrial policies made in China 2025 as a target. But the EU also have the industrial strategy released, US as well. So they have more and more, the competition is more from the same level, similar mechanism. It's not that traditionally considered by China as a developing country. So it's reciprocity or complementary, now be more competitive, more even think about the rival. So there's exports just to China the change. The service is a huge potential. That's the reason, one of the reasons Brexit happens, because the UK is more financial and service competitive advantage, not a traditional goods single market, and they need high level of the talent. So China, UK maybe also potentially cooperate, negotiate the FTA but in the long term. And now the UK also joined the CPTPP. This when China reached the RCEP deal and also declared to join the CPTPP, which also make European Union nervous. That really finalized the negotiation of the investment treaty. And so that's also the goods and the service will be more balanced, as I mentioned. Next page. The service in different European Union countries. That time UK is still a member, but now it's more UK attract more investment from China, more than Germany, France, Italy combined together. So now after Brexit, Germany is attract more Chinese investment, and China, the investment to China is number one, also from Germany, and the Netherlands, and maybe second. France support China support Paris as the international financial center as RMB internationalization after Brexit. So the service and in financial corporations have a more potential in the China-EU cooperation, particularly RMB internationalization and digital currency. So the in service still very limited, but it's a huge potential. High technology, financial open market. When Hainan, we have the financial free trade and investment. So we have 21 pilot free trade zone in China, and we have the Great Bay Area. This is a China-EU cooperation, so it's more towards high quality, high standard, from the traditional goods to the service level, innovation level. Jointly, there still of some barriers, restriction, because the European Union market is very highlights of the anti-monopoly. So they target the US, the ICT giant, also maybe target China, like now the block Huawei to access sensitive technology, 5G. It's not just because of the US pressure, but also they not trust the Chinese system or security. So this is the investment treaty want to solve this problem. However, the European Union is not a strategic security dependent. Even the slogan of this autonomy still long way to go. So that's the China-EU cooperation barriers. And in the eyes of the European Union, China's legal system, and also different understanding about human rights and labor rights, they also cause some problems. So now put China as because China is a secular society, our big data, the face identification technology used very rapidly. This also make Europe think about privacy problem, big data, and also localization of the data, another dispute. So more and more relations focus on the FDI. If Europe approve the comprehensive investment treaty, maybe the second half of this year, or next spring when France to be the rotating presidency, I think sooner or later they're approved because it's good for Europe. And then the China and Europe mutual investment will be boomed because they have the legal bound protection. The electronic automobiles is developing very rapidly, particularly for Germany. Made in Germany, the automobiles, most potential and the increased market is from the Chinese market, more than 40%. They need the Chinese market because they want to set the rules on the electronic automobiles level. So China and Europe cooperate to set the standard and rules. So this makes the US also nervous about that. Actually, US, when China and the US reached the first phase of the trade deal, European Union also nervous. So now they reach maybe it's more balanced. But when Biden, now Biden took power, they also will negotiate with China about not just the second phrase, but then maybe in the other name. So this is a compete each other, Europe, US in Chinese market. Chinese investment in Europe also in the recent years so increased quite rapidly, but also there are some barriers, as I said, the European Union, they also have some so-called sucrement in the investment. They worry about China, so it's more acquisition. The big companies, high technology companies, like 5 years ago, this is a Meidi company with China in Shenzhen, the acquisition of the KUKA robot machinery company. This is a 5G key technology company. So makes Europe very nervous about that. So China's investment not just focus on acquisition, they're more the Greenland investment. Now also invest in the infrastructure like Europe, the water treatment, all this. Okay, so this is I'm not going to in the details because the PPT can send to you you can start very carefully about the different sectors, different because this is a PPT is it's a think tank. It's more the bank use, so it's more in details. While the so-called fair competition, because China still state-owned enterprises is very important. So now they reach the deal, so-called the neutrality in the competition. So China consider about the SOE, whatever private companies or joint ventures or even foreign companies as the entities of the market. We passed the civilian law last year, and also treat all kinds of the companies as the fair competing entities in Chinese market. China now changed the concept. At the beginning, we said the Chinese nationals, citizens, but now they said residents. All the people live in China, they need to protect their legal rights. Whatever you have the green card or Chinese passport or foreign passport, or the foreign companies as well. If they're registered in China, they'll be protected by Chinese law. So that's very important. State-owned enterprises barriers now crossed, neutrality of the competition principles. As I mentioned about the acquisitions, because the European Union also very sensitive about the high technology, because they comparative advantage towards China less and less. So more sensitive about China catch up with in high technology. When China catch up with and then also compete with European citizen norms, the challenge is so-called normative power of Europe. But at the same time, they also need investment from China to keep their comparative advantage with the United States, like the high tech, like the low carbon technology, and new energy technology. So this is both the challenges and opportunities for Europe. So the trade is more towards the servers, and IPR are related towards the low carbon and the carbon neutrality transition, so-called green recovery, green transition, and the digitalization, and also more focus on people's health. So after the pandemic, that's these three major transformation, including BRI. China and the EU also jointly to put forward the multilateralism cooperation WTO reform, because the traditional WTO not covered servers and the digital, like digital trade, e-commerce. So now this is very important for China and Europe. Highlights of the multilateralism. US also now the Biden, but this is US-led multilateralism. It's not a real one. It's not inclusive. So the bilateral investment treaty finalized the negotiation also help both China and Europe to increase their voice in the WTO reform and the multilateral investment and the free trade negotiation, including CPTPP and other regional and cross-regional cooperation. Next, please. Okay, this another one, another PPT is about under the Americans' background, but we are not go to each detail. So I think you can read the PPT directly. Another one is from the Chinese point of view, because I don't want to go to too much. So now I pass the time. I think you can read the PPT and by yourself, and we can have more time to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yiwei. I think your presentations, your insights were quite detailed. The PPT for sure helped a lot of us understand, especially EU-China relations a little more in detail. As Dr. Jaiswal has already introduced you, you have done a lot of work on the BRI front. You've written a lot of books on it, as well as you have been the Jean Monnet Chair for years. So without much delay, let us dive into certain questions so that we can engage in more discussion. You also mentioned certain points about, China's big market. One interesting point, what I could understand, is the trade and services sector, for example, where China needs to do a little more compared to UK. And I think that is also the case if we look at the Indo-Pacific. India, for example, is doing better in terms of trade and services, and China in terms of trade in goods. So let us talk about such thing a little more in details. And I have quite a lot of questions, but I'll start with the question by Dr. Swasti Rao. Her question is that what are the chances that the recently concluded EU-China deal spearheaded by Angela Merkel might face opposition in European Parliament because of human rights abuse issues in China? Professor Wang Yiwei, your view.
Yes, I noticed so many opposition voices, not just in the European Parliament, and even scholars, member state countries. We understand the European Union always so-called highlight the ideology, universal values, human rights, all this to pressure China. However, I think the European Union needs this deal, the trade, the investment treaty. Otherwise, the European Union, they worry about the marginalized. When the China-US reached the first phase of the trade deal, European Union is very nervous about that. When the RCEP reached, they're also very worried about. When China declared to join CPTPP, European Union worried a lot because it's a very high standard. So if there's no the trade investment treaty with China, European Union think about the Eurasia. European Union will be the peninsula of marginalized peninsula of the Eurasia continent. So they very need this deal. They need Chinese market. Can you find another market like China, which has more than 1 billion netizens, 400 million middle class and 170 millions of the entities of the market. And every year, China is produce university students. This year is 9 million, right? So it's huge. Every year, China produces the engineering is more than US, Japan, Germany combined together. So this is a huge dynamic market. I think the European Union cannot neglect. If China reach the deal, like for example, China, Japan, South Korea, free trade, which in data and digital market. So it's a nightmare for Europe. Of course, there are many opposition voices, but the European Commission said very clearly, this is not a Mercosur deal. This is European Union's deal. This is good for European Union. You cannot so-called comprehensive, but you cannot rely on this deal to deal with all the concerns about China, even that include human rights and labor rights in the deal. For instance, China will ratify very soon in the March of the People's Congress of the civilian and the political rights of the United Nations. The International Labour Organization, the many articles which China signed but not approved, also was approved. Privacies and the big data, all this will already include in the deal. And also they have their fourth part, besides the fair competition, market access, and the sustainable development, and the labor rights. There's another so-called many securement and justification even suited the case to the of the kind of mechanism. They also include with the deal. So if China violates so-called some labor rights, human rights, which European Union very concerned, they can punish it to China. Of course, if Europe not make the promise, China also will have the sanctions or pressure to Europe. This is mutually. So I think Europe get what they want. This is China give up a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Yiwei. There is, since we could not touch, I think your another PPT had something to do with China-US relations, and since we don't have too much time, let me spread some questions on different fields. We've dealt with trade. Let's get to a strategic point of view. There's a question about EU changing its perception between 2019 and 20 from a strategic partnership to a systemic rival. Do you consider that in order to maintain a strategic stability, Britain may adopt a revisionist or even a hostile policy towards China? What would you say about that, Professor Yiwei?
Okay, the US not just think about its rival, it's even adversary or enemy. Not just a systematic and even strategic. So that's different with Europe. So Europeans so-called systematic rivals comes from the German Industrial Association that put forward a concept of the systematic competitor. But the European Commission borrowed this concept, put the competitor to rival. But the Europeans said very clearly, the rival means not enemy. It's not means China is an enemy of Europe. No. It's a competitor, it's a competition from the political system, industrial policy strategy. It's not about the security or that kind of strategy, meaning it's not like the US. So it's a more targeted Chinese political system, industrial policy. So that's, of course, China at this point, we are not a rival. But we learn the industrial policies from from the European Union, actually, state-owned enterprises. But now you target China as a so-called rival. When you do it's more efficient, you think about China. Even China we always say we are students of the Europe. PRC, People's Republic of China, Communist Party, everything we learn from Europe. But we practice even BRI, Silk Road, this is a German concept, right? Hitchhofen. So everything we learn from Europe, but now we learn too much quickly and practice more efficiently. And then the teachers think about the students as a rival. So this makes China very embarrassed. I think the Europe even criticized, but they're learning from this. They also have the industrial strategy. They also want to have a more state-owned enterprises. They also want to have their own Google. They also want to have the big data. And they so need China. They claim the rival, but at the same time need to cooperate with China. So we understand this. But US is different. As I mentioned, US cannot accept China rise because it challenges the hegemonic so-called in the name of the leadership. Americans want to dominate the ICT giant want to dominate the big data, and the China challenge this. Europeans, they don't have their own search engine with the big data. So they need China to cooperate to balance US. So we need each other.
Thank you, Professor Yiwei. We have more questions, but since we are running out of time, I would also like to ask one question of my own, and it's to do with developments in Myanmar. So we've seen in the last few hours that there's been a coup and there's been takeover by the military as well. And we also know that a lot of Chinese projects are, a lot of investments are there in Myanmar by China. We saw the opposition, in fact, of the Mitsuone Dam. So what are your comments on the impact of these Chinese projects in Myanmar, given the new developments? Do you think that some of these stalled projects may see revival, or do you think there's going to be more difficulty in implementing some of these projects?
Yes, so the pandemic crisis impact a lot, even long term, not just short term. BRI projects focus on the 5 pillars of the mutual connectivity, policy coordination, right, trade and service and people-to-people connections and all this, because the globalization is not running slowly and softly. So the many projects definitely impact. At the beginning, when China suffered a lot from the pandemic in Wuhan, Hubei, which is a manufacturing hub, so many projects impact, and also because the people cannot travel freely, and also many direct flights, and and even perceptions, misperceptions. Many people criticize China not transparent, even bring this so-called the virus. So many problems. Most important problems, I think, is so-called debts. Many countries, for instance, last Spring Festival, I visited Sri Lanka. The economic much rely on tourist investment, right? But now the tea cannot sell so well, and no so many tourists from China. So we want to help the Sri Lanka. Even we have a direct flight even now, but we cut the direct flight with the UK, with many other countries. But let the China Sri Lanka direct flight still as normal, because I need. The Sri Lanka economy, where you rely on the trade and the tourists, that's very important. But still limited the costs for the transportation. We now have the green light of the personal travel, and also free fast track of the goods, and the green lines of the transportation. So all this is very necessary, but but still not enough, and we need. I think the debt problem is a huge problem. When China's economy is relatively slowing down, last year we suffered the recession also in China, which never happened in 4 decades, right? Recession. So China will more focus on high quality development, high standard. We will cut the budget. So BRI is more focused on not just a BOT and the EPC model and the PPP model, and so private investment is very important. Including from the Western countries. So that's I think we more focus on the light projects, not too heavy. Focus on the digital and green and people's health. So that's major. I think it's different models or corporations in different areas of the Silk Road. So that's basically the different projects.
I see. Thank you. We'll just be taking 2 last questions since we are running out of time. We have Barbara Aunis today with us. Kindly unmute yourself and ask your question and make your intervention, Bal. Are you here?
Yeah, sorry, what's your question?
We have Barbara Onis who wants to ask a question. I request to unmute herself and ask the question.
Okay, myself, of course, I want to know more from you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's a honor.
Because,
okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Wang Yiwei. It's a honor for me to see you and to listen to your very interesting presentation. My question was about, since you mentioned before the strategic partnership between the EU and China, and you just said that the EU and China need each other in order to balance the US. I just wanted to come back to one question. So on the one hand, China and the EU reached recently an agreement on principle on investments, concluding the negotiation for a comprehensive agreement on investment, which started a long time ago. On the other hand, contextually, on December 17th, the EU Parliament condemned China over Uyghur human rights abuses. On the one hand, Brussels worries about the so-called 17+1 platform between China and European, Eastern, and Central countries. So all these problems, don't you think that these different approaches, especially by Brussels, can undermine their strategic partnership? Do you really think that China and EU have a strategic partnership? Thank you for your attention.
Okay, we have nearly 100 strategic partnerships with the countries all over the globe. European Union, besides China, Germany, China, France, China, nearly all European Union members there have signed the so-called comprehensive strategic partnership with China. Of course, this is whether the European Union really strategic autonomy. There too much impact some countries like Poland, Czech Republic, Romania, because of the anti-Russia, so need U.S. security protection, NATO members, and then U.S. put China as the NATO as the virtual enemy, besides Russia. So this is also impact of the China-Polish cooperation. And, so that's they put in the name of the human rights, but besides it's a competitive advantage from China's challenge the U.S. hegemonic power. So China and Europe need each other, not just balance U.S. It's hating U.S. Unilateralism or dollar hegemonic power, like in Iran, right? Long arm justification. But 17+1, the firstly, it's Germany against because the CCIEE countries, this extension of the value chain of made in Germany, like Czech Republic as automobiles, the Germans Volkswagen or that. So the thing about it, this is my cheese. You touch my cheese, backyard. Second reason, Germany against because those countries, they are socialist country before. The thing about China, sells the so-called China model, revive of the socialism in Europe. And Eastern Germany, leader Merkel is very against that. Thirdly, they're against whether China violated the so-called principles, standards of European governance. Particularly in the Balkan, because Serbia is not a member of the European Union, the 5 Balkan countries. But the Chinese side said we always respect the European standard because they apply to join the European Union, so their standard legal system actually integrate to the European Union now. Every time we have a summit, we invite European Union officials, be the observers. So we are very transparent to them. So the need to bridge the gaps between the Eastern and the Western European countries, the new members and the old members. The Europe, East and West, North and South, new and the old members, the gap are very huge. For instance, Bulgaria, the per capita GDP even less than China. It's only 1/8 or even 10th of Luxembourg. So this is reality. So European Union is not a single country. We need to bilaterally, regionally, and multilaterally. So we support the unification and integration of Europe, like the Tiananmen Square. If you visit Beijing, there's a slogan. So the long life of great solidarity of the world people. So China has no interest, no need to divide and rule of Europe. US will do this because Europe is not geographically or enemy or adversary for China. No, China has no interest. So China's BRI is more mutually connected. So those countries are very proud to be part of the 17+1. They'll be the hub of China's investment from like Bulgaria or the Poland, and then as a step, and then invest in the heartland of the Central European countries. So in the eyes of European Union, they are marginalized in the European Union as the new members. But however, if you view the Eurasia, they consider there as the heartland of the Eurasia, as a world island. If you read the so-called Mackinder's geopolitics right analysis, so it's good for them. It's their need, and I think now understandable because of the concerns. So we postponed the summit until the Spring Festival. Last year, China is a rotating presidency with 17+1, but we postponed and postponed until we reached the deal, the trade deal, the investment deal, and then to also actions and plans and open to the European Union. So I think we do our best to try to help Europeans integration and help European Union understandable. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer. And I think just one last question, because and I would request you, in fact, to give a short reply because we need to end the webinar on time. Just generally, you mentioned about the point of China trying to make a shift from quantity to quality, and I think that's something very important. And even UK was one of the first European countries to sign up for memberships in AIIB, for instance. China promised that new bank will be transparent and have high governance standards, but however, that has not been the scenario. So in your opinion, how will China ensure that and maybe regain its, the kind of transparency that a world-class governance demands? Your view.
Okay, we say high quality, high standard. This is firstly, it's a Chinese domestic demand. As I said, we have 400 million middle class, which consume a lot of luxury products that need their personal demand, not just the quantity. So consumer, they need more import more from abroad. That's the reason we have Shanghai Import-Export. So, China's driving forces is more rely on innovation, not just rely on the labor intensive, right? Our labor rights is very expensive now, not rich anymore. So limitation on our resources on the land, and also we need more high technology, high standard. So domestically they need. Globally, they also need high standard because we say sustainable development, climate change, all this. The previous time is made in China. China is a water factory. We import a lot of the oil and the raw materials from abroad and made in China and sells to the US and the European markets. So China is just all the import and export from outside of China. It's not good for China. China pay a lot, even substitutes for the companies to sell to US and the European market. That means Chinese people substitute to the Americans and the European consumers. We pay for them. It's unfair to the Chinese, understand? So now we have a BRI, we will have a more mutually connectivity with our Chinese neighbors. So change that kind of policy. We even have the dual circulation strategy. So more driving forces for China's economic growth, more from the Chinese domestic consumer, high quality. Innovation, high technology, not from the US. We should from our Chinese own innovation, not be the so-called chop neck of the technology by the US and European countries. And thirdly, also big countries, big companies more rely on the domestic, not the external market. So that's driving forces for China's economic growth. The model changed, the BRI changed, also the China-EU relations also changed. Focus more on the high quality, focus more on the innovation, focus more on the rules, standards, norms setting. Sometimes they bring both opportunities and challenges to the European unions. When China joined again high level, and the European Union is not just a normative power, they felt competition from China, but sometimes they need China to cooperate to balance or even hating the US. So that's the complex situation between China and the European relations.
Thank you, Professor Wang Yiwei, for sparing so much time and answering each question with details, in fact. And with this, we come to the end of our webinar. And I hope that this conversation has been useful for all of us. And I'm also sure we can interact in future. Maybe you could visit Kathmandu, in fact, from where we do operate when better times come. I'm also grateful to our audience for staying with us and for asking some of the most important questions. And I'm sure we can engage more on the topic in the future. Thank you to all of you and have a good day ahead. Thank you.